We are covering the globe with UX in the span of 24 hours, right here, continuous streaming content. This event is sponsored by Adobe XD and UX Testing, as well as some associate sponsors in Geneva, Whitespace, as well as Holistic, and big design events out of the US. So this is a really crazy thing that Peter and I are doing. We have no idea why we're doing this to ourselves, and we're glad that you're with us. Thanks very much. We have pretty consistent attendance at around 1,000 people concurrently. But if I look at the number of registrations over the day, just to give you an event of an idea of the scale of this, we are at 6,800, essentially 6,800 people registered. Yes. So our local meetup here in the Geneva area was started by Peter about 6 years ago now. Peter, almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I know that I attended one of the earlier ones. My colleague attended, I think, the very first one that you did, where there were just 10 people sitting around a table in a co-working space in Geneva. And, several years later, we've done upwards of 50 events, and we have, I think, 2,500 members or 2,200 members. I can't remember last count. People come from all over the Geneva region, from even as far as like Neuchâtel and I don't know where else have we had. We had people come all the way from Zurich. So it's a very nice event. I'm sure a lot of the other groups have a similar format. We invite speakers about once a month, and we have a networking session as well. So it's a great opportunity to meet people. And what happened is COVID, and we did an online event in Switzerland. It was interesting, but we thought the constraint gave us some opportunities, and we just decided to go for the globe. And so here we are today. Anything else you'd like to add about the Geneva meetup, Peter, specifically?
No, that was pretty much it. Geneva is lucky enough that it's a small town, especially when compared to places where we've been during and will be going to during this event. But we have a great host of cool organizations. So we are lucky enough to have had people from CERN, which is a physics research institute here, the UN, the World Economic Forum, IBM, Procter. We also had people from startups, Microsoft, exactly, from Zurich. And we also had people internationally from BBC who even attended this meeting earlier on. So we've been lucky with that. And the reason that we did this kind of event is because we know that there's other groups like ourselves struggling with the same problem. So let's come together and be stronger together. And without further talking about us, because who cares? Let's go to the
we've been on here all day. Everybody knows us by now. So.
Exactly. So I want to announce we will have two speakers, and our topic for today will be voice user interfaces. So earlier today, there was a talk about conversational design, and we can have that question as well on how do those two overlap. And we have two speakers. We have Rola Aryaman. So Rola, you are here, I know, on the backstage, so feel free to press the button and request to join via audio and video. And we also have András Rung, and I don't know if András is already around, but if he is, then András as well, I invite you to join the stage. And what we will do in this case is Rola will do an introduction into the topic with some specific examples as well, highlighting various characteristics of voice user interfaces through some examples, but also talking about those things that her and her organization have found that people either don't know at the beginning or may get wrong or suspect wrong. And then we will go over to András, who will then talk about a specific project for a finance institution around a voice user interface project, which is, I think it's in the final stages right now, and share some examples there. And then we will have a Q&A with them to go into some specific details as well. And yeah, I don't know where our speakers are, but do feel free to join and request access. What else can I say until they come on out?
I don't know. We gave them access, so
I'll drop them a line.
okay.
Drop them a line. Quick, Jesse, keep the people occupied.
All right. Well, look, we've had a variety of talks today. Oh, so
Andras is coming. Very good. Whew, saved by the bell. All right, now we're only looking for Rola.
Hello.
Welcome, Andras.
Andras, hi.
Cool.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. Thanks.
And Rola is coming as well. Perfect. We have everyone.
Cool.
So let's give it a second. So I have not yet introduced you two. I'll give a very brief introduction, and then you can go on and tell a bit about what you do exactly and your organizations. So ladies first, Rola is working for Isobar. Hi, Rola.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Hi, Andra.
And she has an international background. She has an MBA, and she's working as a consultant for Isobar, which is one of the big international digital communications and digital agencies. I had the pleasure of working with Isobar years ago as well. They have a international presence and work with great and large clients all around the world. So Rola will be able to tell a bit more about that. And Andras is a UX consultant leading his own consultancy in Budapest, Hungary, working internationally for all kinds of clients. One of their major focus is financial organizations. So they work a lot with banks and fintech organizations. And I don't know, Andras, the size of your organization. I think last time it was around 15, 20 people.
Yeah, we are slightly bigger at the moment, around like 25 people, right. But like more or less in the same range.
All right. So without further ado, Rola, we will give you the stage. So feel free to share your screen, which you should be able to do, and take us through your presentation.
Perfect. Great. Thank you guys so much. So just give me a moment to share my screen. Let's do that. And okay. Perfect. Just gonna see if there's a way that I can share my screen and still see the window.
Not really. Not really. So what we'll do is Jesse and myself will be looking at the discussions to see if there are any questions coming in, and we will be using that in the Q&A after.
Great.
And we'll shout if we don't see anything or something is wrong.
Perfect. Great. So thank you guys so much. First, let me start by thanking you for organizing the event. It's been amazing. I've joined a few in the morning, so it's been a long day for you. So yeah, thanks again. And hello to everyone who is here, being live, watching us today. So I want to start first by introducing myself, and Peter had given a brief introduction. So my name is Rola Eliaman. I'm working at Isobar, digital transformation agency based here in Geneva, Switzerland. Working as a senior consultant. And just to tell you a little bit about my background and my story. So I've been in digital for the past 10 years now. And it really started 10 years ago when I did a master's in Barcelona, which was pretty unique at the time. And it was basically researching the topic of the effects of digital interfaces on human mind, brain, and behavior. And this is where I first came in contact with UX, with HCI, with all of these topics. And I've been fascinated by this intersection between technology and humans all this time, which kind of like took through across my career. So fast forward to all of these years later, I joined Isobar last year as a senior consultant, and I've had the great opportunity to work on conversational interfaces. So I've kind of took on this topic. And it's been super interesting to look at this world. And today I'm going to share with you a little bit more about voice. So I'm going to present first a little bit of an intro about Isobar for those of you who don't know it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what do we mean by voice user interfaces. And then I'm going to talk about some of the challenges more around the use cases, around voice, and show you a couple of examples to be inspired of how we can apply voice into these use cases, and then talk about some of the challenges that brands may have after they have done or launched their voice applications. So without further ado, here we go. So first, very quickly, who we are. So we are Isobar, global digital agency that acts locally. We have offices all over the world. We're part of the Dentsu Aegis network. And we deliver experience-led transformation, putting always the human at the center of the digital experience. And we're pretty unique in the industry in the sense that we are really at the intersection of traditional ad agencies, digital agencies, and consultancies. So we really sit in the middle of these three streams, let's say. And we work in multidisciplinary teams. Not only that, but a lot of cross collaboration across offices in different countries. So it's been like super interesting to see that. So voice at Isobar, which is why we're here talking today. We've all pretty much have now, one way or another, have seen chatbots, interacted with voice assistants. This morning from Manila, Philippines, they had a great presentation about conversational interfaces for some of you that probably had the chance to look at it. But we want to talk about, when we talk about chatbots and voice assistants, we're really talking about this interface. So they're nothing more, nothing less than another interface, just like a screen or a keyboard or a mouse. And they are, the underlying technologies are machine learning and natural language processing. And over the last couple of years, we've seen major advances in both of these technologies, which allowed us to build even more interesting experiences with voice and really opened up a lot of possibilities. Not only have we seen advances on the technology side of things, but on the other hand, we are also seeing advances or changes in the user expectations. So more and more now, technology is intertwined in our daily lives. We have smartwatches, we have smart speakers at home, and we are really expecting a more intuitive experience with technology. So not only constantly looking at screens or typing, it's more of a, let's say, opening up the door for new ways of interacting with technology. So having said that, three key things that this opens up as opportunities, that could be also challenges. So first, having moved to this new way of interacting with technology, which is voice, first, we're missing one key element, which is the visual element. So even when we're conversing with each other, we are seeing each other, we're able to see gestures, pick up on nuances, and pick up on, basically we have more of a visual experience together with voice. When we're interacting with speakers, we only have voice. So how does that translate then to an experience that a brand can think of? So this, on one side, could be a great opportunity because for the first time, brands can have a voice, which they didn't have before. So they don't only interact with consumers via websites or via content. They can really look at having a personality, a voice, and really talking to and having a conversation with their customers. Second thing to really look at when we're looking at voice applications or voice skills is that the technology's conversational nature, it allows for the personality of the brand to shine. But having said that, one key element to keep in mind about voice technologies is that the experience needs to be evoked by the user. So a smart speaker cannot suddenly start talking to you. You would have, as a user, to invoke this experience. So what are those experiences that are going to be compelling enough for the user to demand that interaction? And this is something that really needs to be kind of put front and center when we're starting to think about applications or use cases for a brand. And they're a key part of the design process. And another element is that skills and apps aren't particularly expensive. They're quite fun. They're a way for a brand to be a bit more approachable, to be a bit more personal with their users. Having said that, the bulk of the work that is done when we're looking at voice skills is not so much on actually deploying and creating the skill and going through an iterative process of creating a conversation. The bulk of the work is done at the initial stage, the discovery stage, on identifying what is that use case, identifying what is that interaction that is going to be compelling enough, and what is that interaction that actually makes sense for voice, that I am actually meeting an untapped potential that I cannot fulfill with any other interface. So these are some of the things to really keep in mind when you're trying to identify your use case for voice. And what we have seen is that a lot of brands are excited about it, are ready, but there's always this kind of issue, I would say, to really know what is the use case. Okay, I really want a voice skill, but then what is the next step? What is the application? What is the scenario that I have to put in place to build this skill? So these are some of the key elements that we really kind of need to be mindful of at the early stages of designing the skill. And what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to present a couple of cases to show you how these use cases can translate. So let's start first with the bar. I don't know if some of you are familiar with this skill, but it's an Alexa skill called the bar, developed for Diageo. This was developed out of our Amsterdam team. And basically, the challenge was that the consumption of spirits at home was declining, and the brand wanted a way to engage users or to engage their customers when they are at home. And they kind of come up with this idea of the bar, where it's a Alexa skill that helps you create cocktails at home so that you can be a bartender, or you can be, basically you can create cocktails. And what the team has done is that they've developed and have written 75 plus recipes, and they were all pretty written in a custom copywriting. They were all pretty unique. And not only that, but they had kind of this witty tone of voice to them that was pretty engaging to the customer. Another key aspect of this particular use case and why it was interesting is because it took a scenario where the user actually needs to be hands-free to be creating the cocktail in a way where it can ask for the recipe, stop, pause, repeat, and is able to have that, create that cocktail with the aid of the skill. And this is something that, this is a use case where another interface perhaps could not really be of aid to the customer, to the user at this point. And this is what the voice
Alexa,
sounds.
let's make an espresso martini.
I got a great recipe for an espresso martini. This is how 007 would drink his coffee.
Perfect. And then the next use case that I wanna show, it's also one of my favorites for particular reasons. So this was done for KFC out of our team in China. And the issue was that there was a lot of people that have been moving from regional areas in China, and they have spoken a particular dialect. And then when they have arrived to a big city, they were not being heard, they were not being understood, and it was causing this kind of awkward pressure. And what KFC has done is that they've developed Dumi, which is a voice-controlled robot that understands most of the regional Chinese dialects and was able to take orders in your own personal dialect. And I'm going to show a very quick clip on that for you to understand a little bit more on the case.
大家好，你好，
你好，你好。
大家好。
They were all saying hello in different Chinese dialects.
In China, there are 56 ethnic groups speaking over 80 dialects, which often sound completely different from Mandarin. There are many young people coming to big cities from their hometowns across China to chase the Chinese dream. Here in the big cities, they speak Mandarin so they can fit in. But something really bothers them. When the waiter takes my order, he asks me to repeat what I have just said.
Sometimes when I talk to my colleagues, they ask me to just type. I worry that other people will correct my Mandarin.
I feel like an outsider. KFC hopes that every young person can order with ease and not have to worry about their accent.
Hello, I am Jimmy.
KFC has worked with Baidu to develop an AI concept store in Shanghai and launched the first ever AI service robot in the fast food industry in China, Dumi, which can understand different accents to take orders.
And so, yeah, there you go. This is an example of how voice worked for this particular use case. And why I like this particular case a lot is because it's really tapped onto the personalization of the experience. A scenario whereby KFC cannot possibly have someone in each of their branch that could speak all of these dialects. So it was really a case where we can showcase how voice skills or voice interfaces could really add to the experience. So to recap again, how to identify the use cases. And this may seem pretty straightforward, but it's something that we really kind of need to shift our mindset when we're looking at voice technologies in terms of identifying the use cases. First, always look at solving a real need. So remember that voice skills need to be invoked. So what is that untapped need or unmet user need that is going to be strong and compelling enough for the user to demand that interaction with your voice skill, and for it to be actually helpful and fit in a daily routine perhaps, or help with a particular problem that cannot be solved otherwise. Second is you should definitely always remember to align it with the brand. The design is the personality. So where before we have done wireframes and put text and images where images could go on a website, here the design of the chatbot really is the personality. It's that conversation, it's that copywriting of the conversation, and how this interaction is going to be with the user. And the last thing is definitely always look at how you can drive business results, unlocking new revenue streams. Are you going to integrate your voice skill with e-commerce to create purchase orders directly from the skill? Are you reducing any operational costs within your company? And which communication opportunities are you driving and engaging your customers with? So these were the 3 takeaways for identifying your voice use case. And this is me for now. So I can first thank you so much for your time. And if there are any questions, we're going to take that later during the fireside chat. And I'll pass it over to Jesse now.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And Andras, if you can come back and then you can share your screen, and Rola, I'll ask you in the meantime while Andras is presenting for you to hide the audio and video so that he can have stage back in about 10 minutes when Andras is done. Over to you, Andras.
Yes, I'm back. So I'm just sharing my screen. Oops. So, you see my screen?
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
And still you see it, no? Like, no, it's full.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, just some words about me that I'm András Jung and I'm leading ergonomic product design As Peter mentioned, like we all operate like Europe-wise, and we are focusing on fintech. And today I'm going to talk about that, how we created a voice prototype from scratch within some weeks. So first of all, I will talk about the state of the art in voice banking. That though we hear more and more about voice solution, we're kind of unsure about the truth regarding them. That like we know that Alexa has more than 10,000 employees. We have also heard about Bank of America famous voice assistant Erica, which is more than 10 million users, and we can keep up with almost 100 banking voice solution all around the globe. But in Europe, we still feel a bit that it won't impact us in the future, especially if our mother tongue is not English. Like Tales of Voice solution are like Tales of Promised Land or Dreams of Atlantis for us. And Europe is not just economically fragmented, but it's fragmented language-wise as well. And we have around like 24 official languages in the European Union alone, but only 6 of these are covered by Alexa and 11 by Google Assistant, not too much, honestly. And both are hitting on bigger languages like German or languages of richer nature like Norwegian or Danish. And though these giants are neglecting many languages, we have already seen voice solution all over Europe. Like I would mention first that like Dutch-speaking solution from ING Netherlands, what was introduced in 2014, or another one by OTP Bank in Hungary, who developed the voice money transfer solution. And both of them based on Nuance technology, not on Alexa or Google Assistant. And what inspired us to have a voice solution or work on that in Ergomania, we have been actively searching for options to create unique voice solution interfaces for many years. But honestly, you might know everything about the topic. Without a partner, you can't progress. So it was like reading all the dating handbooks on a solitary island, but without meeting real people, you are not going to find the love of your life. But we didn't give up, and we relentlessly preached about these topics on our meetups and in webinars. And one day the seeds fell into good soil and produced a shot. So we found a Central European banking partner who wanted to create a proof of concept with us for voice banking. And many people criticize like corporate innovation for being not effective, but honestly, we have seen good examples like Treasurer by Rabobank or Simple by OTP. And we can find innovative people everywhere if they get the right means, like proper financial affordances and significant or sufficient independence from the daily businesses. So we had the setup and we started to work on that. But from the beginning, we have faced several challenges because like crafting a completely new interface for a new channel, it needs a lot of experimentation. So in agency business, we use like templates, framework, established business processes, and here we had nothing. So we have saved several problems from the beginning. First of all, we couldn't use any previous system like Alexa or Google Assistant because like they were not available for our language. So we couldn't back up just dialogues rapidly in that. We were all the time questions whether it will be work and whether it will be go in the mobile bank. And of course, at this phase, we couldn't decide and we couldn't tell. Another big problem was that like we used the natural language processing system, NLP, which was like a black box for us. So we didn't know exactly how it works. It was given. And we had neither the budget and time for proper research. And also we didn't have mobile development resources. So we had to create a web-based POC for the mobile banking solution. And so our approach was that like since we had limited resources, we had to narrow down our scope, and we were focusing just on simple domestic payments. We knew that it was a very limited scope, but we also realized that it was important to demonstrate that all parts of our solution, like Google speech-to-text technology, the web interface, and the NLP service work together very well. And we decided to leave out speech production since it was not the highest quality in our target language. And based on the studies, we knew that like we read twice as fast as we listen. So we followed the Erica way from Bank of America in this case. And though we had like limited budget, we insisted on doing at least some research. So after signing all the necessary GDPR documents, we got samples from customers who sent in reality money via the call center. And we thought that it will be like a kind of excellent input for teaching examples, but for our NLP service, and also wanted to craft like based on construction grammar, a kind of pre-processing layer for the NLP black box, since we didn't know how it works exactly. But when you face reality, you learn that it's a bit different what you are expecting. And people making payments by phone were usually like older people and a little bit confused. And on the contrary, our target group for voice payment was rather like cool digital people who love to try out new things. So we dreamt about interactions like this, that like, hey Adela, send 800 crowns to Jan. And instead of that, we had samples like this that like, hello, good afternoon. I'm talking to the right person. I'm a bit confused. I was thinking about giving the usual money to Praska Energetica, and I don't know their account number, but I think last month I already sent them money. Can you go back and check my transaction history? I think it was before Christmas. I'm not sure. Some around 500 pounds, maybe a bit more. So these interactions were not clear enough to easily identify the intent by hitting on some basic keywords, and not to mention that they have core references and reflect on data what should be mined on unclear conditions. And so we crafted sample utterances for send money intent from call center conversation, but we were not very satisfied with them, and we wanted to have more real data. And we plan to go to branches to talk to real people and also do guerrilla interviews in shopping malls, but unfortunately, our time was too short for that. So instead of that, we were collecting sample sentences from banking employees with a questionnaire. A big number of them filled it out, the questionnaire, and this gave us enough examples to feed the engine. The problem was that like, you know, that it's not the most ideal setting, so it's not the best way of research, but this was available for us. And yes, banking employees are biased and too knowledgeable, but we collected anyway like 100 examples, and all of them sounded real. And we knew that we couldn't go wrong with them. So maybe we just missed some creative ways of saying like send money, but in general, they were pretty useful for feeding the engine. And it was also quite tough to select the speech-to-text service for us. And since Alexa and Google Assistant was not an option for us, and also Nuance was like pretty expensive, and it was hard to engage in a conversation with them. So it's not very easy to implement Nuance solution if you want to pay for that. And based on our restriction, we selected the Google Speech-to-Text API, and we implemented that. And it worked quite well, but even in some silent context, it made some weird mistakes. And most of them were based on lack of context or lack of semantics. And you have to notice that like there is difference between like send 500 crowns to Barbara Bandon or send 550 or 150 crowns to Barbara Abandon. And since voice interfaces are new for users, we recognize that they hesitate a lot while they are speaking. And this hesitation can lead to meaningless but morphologically correct segmentations. And you can see like some screens from the solution, how we were supporting the voice dialogues with feedback. And based on our research, we created these screens, and like we had like 3 steps, like account overview, speech input, and transfer overview. And based on the short time available, we could not provide the users with the ability to add or correct individual parameters like currency, recipient, and so on. So if something went wrong, they had to repeat their intent with all the necessary parameters to execute the transaction. We know that it's a limitation, but that's what we could achieve within the short time frame. And after with our visual and voice, and since the last steps were completed in March 2020, we had some difficulty executing voice tests remotely because of the COVID-19 period. And we ran two rounds of tests. And the first round, we focused on finding and fixing the most critical technical problems. And then we enhanced the concept and the UX. And during the analysis, we had to neglect problems that were clearly related to the nature of POC, like post design. And users were irritated, for example, that they had to stop the recording rather than it happening automatically, or just putting the microphone and hoping the users would be kind of very naive to expect the users to interact with that. It would be kind of blatantly naive. And during our testing, we identified dozens of problems just with one single sentence, but this is a kind of nature of UX testing. So if you have like fewer than 20 problems identified, your testing method definitely sucks. So the main UX findings, what we found, they were the following: that like microphone didn't work to start the voice interaction. You need a wake word and a proper intro for the users who to start to use the solution. Text should be refined to perfection, because examples are taken literally, since the users, they don't know what they can say and what they can't say. And intents without the ability to fix incorrect parameters are almost impossible to use. Sending money to contacts is difficult if you don't provide the user with tools to know who they are saved contacts. And for this reason, contact management should be redesigned before your voice project if you're dealing with banking. And also people expect intents to be launched that are related to the screens where they stand. And basically, this was a kind of short summary of project and what's next. So we want to continue, like we are waiting for a green light to implement a real solution with limited functionality. And we try to be one of the smoothest non-English voice banking solution that doesn't rely on Alexa or Google Assistant. And also, like with this project, we try to be in the voice fame of all, hopefully, because there are very limited and very small number of similar projects in Europe at the moment. And thank you very much for your attention.
András, that is perfect. Thank you very much. And Rola, will have you back on the stage. Please share your audio and video. Hello. And we'll go into some questions. So you are on the chat. Jesse, can you actually look at the event chat and take some questions from there?
I'm scrolling through, and there's quite a bit.
I have some already.
Stuff, so maybe you start.
Yeah, so I have one which is just to wrap up these two presentations. So both of you have done voice projects. What is the single most important thing you wish you knew today, or you knew when you started on your first voice project, that you already know today, but you did not know back then? So Rola, I'll give the first round to you.
Sure. I mean, I will probably talk about a challenge that we have seen, that, you know, from a brand perspective, that, okay, you've done your voice skill, you have launched it, but from the perspective of a big brand, not only you want to have one voice skill that is on Alexa, but you want to have the same skill perhaps on Google Assistant. But not only that, you may have multiple brands, and each of them have their voice skills. So one thing to start to think about, and especially if you are doing voice at a large scale, is not only how do you create the voice skills and the experience to the user, but how is it the experience to the actual person or the brand manager that is managing those skills. So this is one aspect that perhaps is not really like talked about, or when we talk about voice, we always look at the interaction with the user, but there's also UX and like things to be done more on the brand manager perspective. So this is one thing that kind of like came up, and it's actually one thing that is a challenge from one of our current clients that we're trying to help them with on this particular topic.
It's definitely very labor intensive. I would agree with that. Building that personality, of course, you can go through the whole UX process to do that. But then when it comes to content, that's where it gets, you know, interesting. And of course, you can learn as you go along, and there's learning in a lot of these platforms that you build. But yeah, there's a question for you actually about the KFC example. Just as an example, they're wondering where you got the samples. Where do you get the samples of the different dialects?
Yeah, I mean, so as this example was done out of our team in China, so I wasn't directly involved in this particular project, but it's something that that we can check. But basically, there was a big team working together, and it was also in conjunction with Baidu. So there was a kind of like a joint venture around developing this application, and then they've also helped around developing this project. So it was done on like pretty much a bigger scale.
Right. I mean, it's a very custom case. I know that by default, some of the platforms offer some small talk libraries that you can plug and play. and then adapt, which is very nice to get started.
Yeah.
Small talk being obviously one of the overlooked elements of a lot of voice user interfaces. Would you care to comment on that, Andras?
Sorry, I didn't hear you very well.
Sorry, I asked about whether either of you have an opinion about small talk.
I think it's like a kind of important element, like mostly in our voice solutions, what we were crafting, like we were focusing on more basic things, because like in the languages, what we are handling, like you have to build like the real basics by hand. And like at this stage, like you're focusing more on the basic element, but other ways, I think it's pretty important to give like a real feeling for the solution.
By real feeling, you mean like it feels like a human?
Yeah, like to have this human feeling. I don't think that like necessarily like when you are dealing with the voice assistant, you have to feel that like your assistant is your best friend or whatever, but like really to have a kind of more comfortable feeling, and you don't have to feel that like you are really just going between fences and like whatever, you are just leaving the key topic, the assistant can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question. Compared with regular digital projects, how are voice projects different? What are the key, most important new capabilities, teams, relationship between teams, or approaches in terms of project management that are needed? And for this, I asked Rola last time. So Andras, can you take the first answer on this one?
Yeah, I think the difference is that like you need much more expertise. So different type of people than in a standard UX project where you already know the kind of roles. So here you need a very different type of UX designers, like conversational designers who understand also language. So like it's not just that they read a book about that, that's how it works in general, but they have a concept that like how conversations are built, what is pragmatics, what is grammar, how morphology works, and so depending, of course, in the language. So they should not be necessarily linguists, but like they have to have a good understanding of that. And also a very different type of development capabilities are needed to integrate those services or to build them, depending on the language. So I think usually voice projects are more complex because there are more parties involved, and also because they are less visual and more linear. It's harder to spot the problems and the mistakes than like if you're just checking wireframes and you print, I don't know, like 50 wireframes and you see the problems. With the voice project, it's much harder. Of course, you can have like flow charts where they show the structure,
right.
But it's not that obvious that like if something is wrong.
Yeah. Do you use modeling tools like BotMock or others, Andras?
At the moment, like we are using like more like standard diagram tools to analyze for ourselves, or when we are working with Dialogflow, we just use the tools available, because like for Hungarian and other Central European languages, these are not that useful at the moment because they are not integrated.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, I'll put it in the chat. There are some tools out there that are sort of cross-platform, such as BotMock, that sort of simulate what the experience would be like for a user on, let's say it's on Messenger, for example, on Facebook, or it's on Google Assistant, and you can really simulate the chat experience and model it out and then test it. There's a question actually about testing before implementation.
Yeah.
And I think that, Andras, you touched on testing, but I'm wondering if Rola has also been involved in any testing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add something regarding the last question about the project setup and management. So to what Andras has said about the team setup, so it's definitely having the conversational designer, the UX designer, but also you would have to set up your team in an agile way. So sprints are very important. So if your team is not set up to work in sprints, testing, doing tasks quickly and iterating. So this is a key element of conversational design in general. So you would have to create your prototype and test and learn and have those feedback loops set in place directly from the get-go.
I have a very nice question from Ilona Ludevic. How does the uncanny valley influence voice interaction? So for those who don't know, the uncanny valley is our reluctance or lack of reluctance with engaging with a human-like entity. So when we are watching a film and something looks almost exactly like a human, but not exactly, just before that there is a pushback from humans that it's familiar but just a bit wrong, and it feels very off. Whereas if something is not like a human, but it looks like a robot, we're happy to engage with that. So in voice, how does that translate? Do we have this similar pushback to almost human-like conversation versus something that you can hear is a machine answering? Andras, maybe you take this one.
Yeah, I think like in finance there are some special tools. So like I just remember that like last year I was participating in a voice summit in New York, and Tobias Wenger was talking about that in financial solutions people, they have a bit different expectations than in standard voice solutions, that they expect them to be less human-like, that like that they would feel more that they are dealing with a kind of robot or something like this. So I think there are different kind of industries where the expectations are different by people, how human they want their voice assistant. And also I think it's a kind of problematic case at the moment that like sometimes the interactions, they sound very human, like the voice and the quality of the voice or the understanding and so on. But the AI or the natural language processing is very limited in some situations. So it can create a lot of frustration for people that, oh, it sounds very real and it's very cool, and they run into problems very easily if at this stage. I think that might be a problem, that like the level of humanness is very mixed at these solutions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. There was a question about whether you think that voice user interfaces will be, as they mature, will be a benefit to disabled persons or persons that are perhaps visually impaired. How does that play a role? Because there actually still is an interface in many ways, except unless you're on like Alexa. You can have a mix, in other words. Some of the VUIs are mixed, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And others are not. Others are pure voice. So the question is, how is that going to impact people with disabilities?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're looking at a scenario where perhaps like being hands-free, or maybe having sort of like evoking an interaction, having some help from technology in particular, for this particular case. So voice definitely could be a solution. It's more about looking at really diving deep onto the use case. So once you go into the topic of probably having a skill to assist with disabilities, maybe you're entering into like health issues, there are things that you need to keep in mind in terms of security, in terms of not having the human rely completely on that voice assistant, for example, to do certain tasks, and then for that technology to fail. So just keeping in mind those kind of scenarios, and picking a scenario that makes sense.
Following up on that, I have a question here from Andrew Young, and he's asking, how does accommodation for mute, deaf, and hard of hearing play into these? So yeah, this is a big question, because accessibility usually requires that there is a fallback solution, or that there are at least facilitation to make it usable. So we have screen reading software for visual things. How does this work on the voice side? Andras, do you have because you basically need to duplicate the entire solution in a non-voice setup, right?
Yeah, I think like since like our solutions, because they are kind of handmade, they are a bit less reliable than, for example, the Google or Alexa solutions, because like they're more matured. So like you can provide fallback that like the two interface, like for example, mobile interface and the voice, they live next to each other, so you can fall back all the time. So for example, like the third time you couldn't modify that parameter with your voice, you can do it manually also. So I think at this phase it's kind of critical that like, but I think it's a kind of, as Rola was showing, it's a kind of evolution that like when mobile solutions, they were crappy, always you could fall back to the desktop. So like you could switch back to something more mature channel, what has more functionality and it was more developed, but like step by step it's changing, and I'm sure that like in not which would be that able that you should not need that much these fallback methods, or they will be mixed. So in some situation, voice will be the fallback for mobile.
All right, Jesse, do you see another one? I have some backed up.
Go ahead, Peter.
So there's this question, where should voice projects originate in an organization? So we talked a bit about the implementation side of it. Now let's talk a bit about, if you're in an organization and thinking about having someone create for you a voice project, like where should it ideally originate? Rola, maybe you can take this.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my opinion, it's really an initiative that needs to be driven by the person in the organization that owns the customer experience, that owns the brand experience, together with the IT department as an enabler. Having said that, it's really not, we're not really, I mean, if a brand just wants to kind of like experiment in having one activation with voice, then absolutely it can be run through your marketing department or even your local country. But if it's something that you want to have as a service, not only that, but have as a customer experience where you have your brand actually interacting with the users or with its customers, having a voice, it really needs to originate from high in the organization. And not only that, but be looked at on all aspects of the user journey or the user experience, all from the awareness all the way to loyalty, and see where are these opportunities are and how can we deliver and interact with our customers.
Right. It's not worth doing unless there's a real need that it meets.
Yeah.
I mean, I think your case studies were excellent in that regard, because they were definitely targeted at a real need. And we actually had people on the chat today saying, yeah, that's a real problem in China. Right. They could identify with it. Yeah. So that's great.
So Jesse, do you have another, or should I?
No, keep going.
All right. I have one, a generic one. What resources can you recommend for the audience if they want to dig deeper into the topic? So maybe Andras, if you have some things on that.
Yeah, I think that like it's a very good start that like Caterpillar has this voice design interface book. I think it's containing all the necessary elements to start, and still now it's very concise and it's quite up to date, because there is the Gyangol and Balog book, but it's a kind of classic, but it's a bit older. So like it's around, I don't know, 15 years old. I would recommend these two books to start with, because usually like when you're browsing the net and reading articles, they are kind of generic. So like you don't understand really what's up. You can get enthusiastic by the articles, what you read, but like you don't know what to do afterwards. And these books are, I think, more practical, and you really need detail that like you could go into that. And also, I think it's interesting to read some kind of books about language, how it works in reality. So if you want to deal and build conversations, you have to really understand that, like how pragmatics, grammar, and conversational rules are happening. And for this, it's I think it's the best stories like construction grammar. What is the closest? How these interactions are built.
Awesome. Jesse, anything else that you see? Family.
Sorry, I'm being interrupted. Hold on one second.
I think there was a couple of,
hold on one
a couple
moment.
of hours ago, there was a cat that literally just walked through the screen. I really love that. Then I'll take the pressure off. I have another one, which is so design systems, right? They are now bringing everything under one roof, from colors all the way to code snippets. Are design systems prepared for voice user interfaces, or are even the branding people prepared for voice user interfaces? Are even the elements for what a voice user interface brand should include? Are they existing? Rola, maybe for you.
Yeah, I mean, we're really at the beginning of interfaces. Even if you want to start looking at frameworks, so there are multiple frameworks that are there. There are frameworks that are being developed, and as you said, so different from designing for visual, where you have fonts, colors, etc. How do you design for personality? So it's almost going back into like a school where you had these exercises in English language. I don't know if you've had those, where you had to kind of like write an essay about impersonating a chair or a lap. Actually, it's called not impersonating, personification. So how do you design for personification? So I don't think that I don't think there's like one way to do it. I think it's definitely we're going to see more and more themes coming up in design regarding design for conversations. I think Google came up with one lately regarding the duality of the conversation. It's not at the top of my head what they call that, but and on the other hand, there will be also, we're seeing more and more tools that are coming up to help, to aid in this design process, whether it's creating the flowcharts, whether it's using visual cues or creating these kind of like dialogues to do that. So we've only kind of scratched the tip of the iceberg on tools. There's always the old way of doing it, of just like writing text, like writing a mock conversation. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how that develops, but we definitely don't have all the necessary tools yet.
Okay, Andras, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I think regarding design system, I think it's quite important to have it for voice, but I just know one example like created by BBC. So they already have some kind of design guidelines for BBC voice solutions should be crafted. I think here is the most important element to keep consistency, because usually it's very hard to keep consistent visual interfaces, but since voice is linear, hard to check the consistency, and especially in some system, it's not, you don't have a very good overview, like for example in Dialogflow, that where you modify the conversation. And on the other hand, it's important that you would have variation in talking, because if it will be super consistent, it will be very monotonous. So that's why, for example, many systems, they allow to have some random variation in the responses for the same thing. So it's very hard to balance likeness, because if it's very monotonous, it's not human-like.
All right, so with that, we are coming up to the top of the hour. And what we will do now is Jesse will go with Rola and Andras to the session. So at the sessions, please go to Geneva, Switzerland. And there, if you want to continue asking your questions or discuss with Rola and Andras, then please go there and have a discussion. But as always, the content continues here on the main stage, because we actually, with this event, we just went over the first half. So we are now officially in the second half of the 24 hours of UX. Yay! So Andras and Rola, thank you very much for joining us. And then in the sessions, there should be around 30 more minutes available for you. And Jesse should already be there and helping with facilitating the discussion between the audience and yourselves. And for the audience, there you will be able to even join via audio and video, so that you can ask questions directly, potentially. And what I actually wanted to do, but I didn't, is I wanted to just shut off my video to show that, this is voice user interface. We should have gotten rid of the video in the first place, because, it's only the audio and not the visual. So thank you very much, Rola, as well. So see you in the sessions. Well, Jesse, will see you there.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rola.